Three rich men bullied the waitress. Then the billionaire CEO checked the cameras and did something horrible. What if the smallest act of kindness could change someone's entire world? And what if cruelty could reveal the true character of those who think money makes them untouchable? Elena Rodriguez had been wiping down the same table for the third time when she heard their laughter, the kind that cuts through a person's dignity like glass. The three men in expensive suits sat in the corner booth of Murphy's diner, their voices growing louder with each cruel joke about her accent, her worn uniform, her trembling hands as she tried to balance their complicated orders. At 62, Elena had learned to let harsh words roll off her shoulders. But tonight felt different. Tonight, her arthritis acted more than usual, and her granddaughter's medical bills sat heavy in her mind. She didn't know that the quiet man in the simple gray sweater, sitting alone at table 12, was watching everything with eyes that had built empires and toppled those who forgot their humanity. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Elena had worked at Murphy's Diner for 18 years, ever since her husband Miguel passed, and left her with nothing but memories and mounting debts. The small-town restaurant wasn't much to look at. Faded red vinyl booths, checkered linoleum floors that had seen better decades, and coffee that was strong enough to wake the dead. But it was honest work, and Elena took pride in treating every customer like family, remembering their usual orders and asking about their children. The three men who walked in that Tuesday evening were clearly not from around here. Their designer shoes clicked against the worn floor with an arrogance that made Elena's coworkers exchange worried glances. Richard Caldwell, the loudest of the three, owned a chain of luxury hotels. His companions, Vincent Shaw and Bradley Hunt, were real estate developers who specialized in buying small-town properties and turning them into something cold and profitable. They'd spent the day touring the area looking for their next acquisition. "This place is perfect," Caldwell said loud enough for the entire diner to hear. "Tear it down, put up a parking garage for the new shopping complex. These people don't know what progress looks like." Elena approached their table with 3 menus and her warmest smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Murphy's. Can I start you off with some coffee?" Shaw looked her up and down with disdain. "Do you even speak English properly?" "We don't have time for guessing games." Elena's smile faltered slightly, but she kept her composure. "Of course, sir. I've been speaking English for 40 years. What would you like to drink?" The men exchanged amused looks. 40 years, and you still sound like you just crossed the border yesterday. Hunt laughed. "Maybe stick to jobs that don't require talking." At table 12, David Chin sat quietly over his simple dinner of meatloaf and mashed potatoes. At 42, he was the founder and CEO of Chin Enterprises, a technology company worth $12 billion. But here in Murphy's Diner, wearing jeans and an old sweater, he looked like any other customer. He'd been coming here for 6 months, ever since he'd bought a small cabin in the mountains to escape the pressure of corporate life. Elena had always treated him with kindness, never asking questions about his life, simply ensuring his coffee cup stayed full and his meals were served with genuine care. David watched as Elena's shoulders tensed at the men's cruel words. He'd seen her light up when talking about her granddaughter Sophia, who was fighting leukemia at the Children's Hospital 3 hours away. Elena worked double shifts to help pay for treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. Never complaining, never asking for sympathy, the 3 men continued their harassment as Elena took their order, commenting on her appearance, her age, and making jokes about deporting hardworking people like her. Other customers began to notice, their conversations dying down as an uncomfortable tension filled the diner. Elena's hands shook slightly as she wrote down their orders, her usual grace cracking under their relentless cruelty. David set down his fork and quietly reached for his phone. Most people didn't know that Chin Enterprises owned a significant stake in Caldwell's hotel chain, or that David's investment firm held the mortgages on Shaw and Hunt's most profitable properties. As Elena hurried toward the kitchen, clearly fighting back tears, David made a decision that would change everything. Elena's hands trembled as she clipped the order to the kitchen window. Behind her, she could hear the 3 men's laughter growing louder, their conversation turning to how they planned to clean up the town by getting rid of businesses like Murphy's. She'd heard talk like this before, but never so openly cruel, never so personal. "Hey, Maria," Caldwell called out, deliberately using the wrong name. This coffee tastes like dishwater. Don't they teach you people how to make decent coffee? Elena turned around, her dignity intact despite the humiliation burning in her chest. My name is Elena, sir. I'll bring you a fresh pot right away. Elena, Maria, whatever. Shaw waved dismissively. Just make sure it's better than the swill you served us. And while you're at it, maybe your boss should consider hiring someone who actually belongs in this country. The words hit Elena like physical blows. She'd become an American citizen 25 years ago, had raised 3 children here, had buried her husband in the local cemetery. This country wasn't just her home. It was woven into every fiber of her being. But these men saw only her accent, her brown skin, her tired uniform. Young Danny Murphy, the owner's grandson who helped in the kitchen, emerged with their food. At 19, Danny had grown up watching Elena treat his family like her own, especially after his grandmother died. He'd learned Spanish just to talk with Elena's granddaughter when she visited. The anger in his eyes was unmistakable as he set down their plates. The food better be worth the wait, Hunt said, cutting into a steak. Though I doubt it, this whole place screams health department violation. Elena watched from behind the counter as they deliberately made a mess, spilling sauce on the table and dropping napkins on the floor. They seemed to take pleasure in creating work for her, in watching her clean up after their carelessness. Other customers had stopped eating, some looking angry, others appearing uncomfortable but unsure how to intervene. David Chun had seen enough. He opened his laptop and began making calls, his voice too quiet for anyone to overhear. As the founder of Chun Enterprises, he had resources these men couldn't imagine. What they didn't know was that their entire business empire was built on a house of cards, and David held many of the key pieces. The twist came when Caldwell's phone rang. His face went pale as he listened to the voice on the other end. What do you mean? The Henderson project is being reviewed, he said, his previous arrogance cracking. That deal was signed last month. Shaw and Hunt exchanged worried glances as their phones began buzzing, too. Suddenly, the 3 men who had been so confident, so cruel, looked like little boys who'd been caught breaking windows. Elena approached their table with a coffee pot, professional despite everything they'd put her through. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. She had no way of knowing that the quiet man at table 12 was orchestrating a symphony of justice with nothing more than a few phone calls and the power of human decency. As Elena poured their coffee, Caldwell grabbed her wrist. You did this somehow, didn't you? You called someone. Sir, please let go of me, Elena said calmly, though her heart was racing. The moment Caldwell's hand closed around Elena's wrist, the entire diner fell silent. Elena had faced discrimination before, had endured countless small cruelties over the years, but no one had ever laid hands on her. The coffee pot slipped from her free hand, shattering on the floor as hot coffee splashed across the worn linoleum. I said, "What did you do?" Caldwell snarled, his grip tightening. Our deals don't just fall apart for no reason. Elena's eyes filled with tears, not from the pain in her wrist, but from the helplessness of the moment. She was 62 years old, tired from working 2 jobs, and now this stranger was physically hurting her because his own world was crumbling. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered. Please, you're hurting me. Danny Murphy shot out from behind the counter, his young face flushed with anger. Let go of her right now, or I'm calling the police. Shut up, kid, Shaw barked. This doesn't concern you, but it did concern everyone in that diner. Elena had served coffee to the farmer in booth 3 every morning for 12 years, had attended his daughter's wedding, and brought casseroles when his wife was sick. The elderly couple by the window remembered how Elena had visited them in the hospital, how she'd refused to let them pay for their meals when money was tight. The single mother in the corner booth knew Elena had quietly slipped an extra sandwich into her son's to-go bag more times than she could count. David Chin stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. His voice was calm, but carried an authority that made Caldwell immediately release Elena's wrist. I think you gentlemen should leave now. Who the hell are you? Hunt demanded, but something in David's steady gaze made him take a step back. Elena rubbed her wrist. The the skin already showing the red marks from Caldwell's grip. She looked at David with confusion and gratitude, not understanding who this quiet customer was or why these powerful men suddenly seemed nervous around him. David's eyes were kind as he helped her to a chair, his movements gentle and respectful. "My name is David Chun," he said simply. "And I believe you three have somewhere else to be." The color drained from Caldwell's face. Chun Enterprises wasn't just any company. It was a titan that had quietly woven itself into the fabric of dozens of industries, the hotel chain that made Caldwell rich, the investment firm that funded Shaw's developments, the technology that powered Hunt's real estate empire. All of it connected back to the man standing in front of them in worn jeans and an old sweater. "Mr. Chun," Caldwell stammered. "We didn't know. We were just what?" David's voice remained calm. "Just terrorizing a hardworking woman? Just making jokes about deporting an American citizen? Just putting your hands on someone who's shown you nothing but kindness." Elena stared at David in shock. She'd been serving this man simple meals for months, treating him like any other customer, never imagining he had the power to make grown men tremble. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. But in that moment, what struck her most wasn't his wealth or influence. It was the genuine anger in his eyes at her mistreatment, the way he'd stepped forward to protect her without hesitation. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled, a cold expression that made the three men shift uncomfortably. "Gentlemen, I believe your lawyers are trying to reach you. Something about loan recalls and contract reviews." Caldwell's phone erupted in a symphony of ringtones and notifications. His hands shook as he scrolled through message after message from panicked business partners, investors, and legal teams. 20 years of building his hotel empire, and it was unraveling in real time because he couldn't treat a waitress with basic human decency. "This is impossible," Shaw whispered, staring at his own phone. "The Morrison project, the waterfront development, the shopping complex, they can't all be under review at the same time." "Actually, they can," David said matter-of-factly. "When you build your success on other people's money, you should probably treat people better." "Elena, would you like to press charges for assault?" Elena looked around the diner at the faces of people she'd served for nearly 2 decades. Danny Murphy stood behind her like a protective son. The farmer from booth 3 had quietly moved closer, ready to testify about what he'd witnessed. The elderly couple held hands, their eyes bright with fierce protectiveness for the woman who'd been part of their daily routine for so long. "I just want them to leave," Elena said softly. "I don't want any more trouble." David nodded with respect for her choice, but his expression remained stern as he turned back to the 3 men. "You heard her. Leave now, and consider this your only warning. If I hear about any of you treating service workers, immigrants, or anyone else with disrespect again, the consequences will be permanent." Hunt, who'd been silent since learning David's identity, finally found his voice. "Mr. Chin, surely we can work something out that we're reasonable businessmen." "Reasonable businessmen don't assault 62-year-old women," David replied. "Reasonable businessmen don't mock people's accents or make deportation jokes. You had your chance to be reasonable." The 3 men gathered their belongings hastily, their earlier arrogance replaced by desperate calculation. As they headed for the door, Caldwell turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Chun. You can't control everything." David's smile was genuine this time, and somehow that was more terrifying than his earlier coldness. "You're right. I can't control everything, but I can control the 60% stake my company holds in your hotel chain, the investment firm that holds your commercial mortgages, and the technology licensing agreements that power your reservation systems. Have a good evening, gentlemen." As the door chimed behind them, the diner erupted in spontaneous applause. Elena stood there, still processing what had happened as her regular customers surrounded her with hugs and words of support. Danny Murphy brought her a fresh cup of tea, his hands still shaking from anger at what he'd witnessed. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. David approached Elena slowly, his demeanor completely different now that the threat had passed. Gone was the cold authority he'd wielded against the 3 men. In its place was the gentle kindness Elena had come to know over months of quiet dinners. "Are you okay?" he asked, genuinely concerned. "Should we call a doctor to look at your wrist?" Elena shook her head, then looked up at this man she thought she knew. "Who are you really?" David sat down across from Elena at her favorite booth by the window, the same place where they'd had dozens of quiet conversations about the weather, the changing seasons, and her granddaughter's brave fight against leukemia. The other customers gradually returned to their meals, but the warmth in the air was palpable. The feeling of a community that had witnessed justice and chosen love over indifference. "I'm exactly who I've always been when I'm here," David said gently. "Just a guy who appreciates good meatloaf and even better company. The business world, that's different. That's not who I am when I sit in this booth." Eloanina studied his face, seeing past the revelations of the evening to the man who always asked about Sophia's treatments, who left generous tips, not for show, but out of genuine appreciation, who listened when she talked about Miguel's memory and the small joys that kept her going. "You've been coming here for months. Why didn't you ever say anything?" "Because this place is special, precisely because nobody treats me like a CEO here," David explained. "You serve me coffee because I'm thirsty, not because I own stock in something. You ask about my day because you care, not because you want something from me that's rarer than you might think." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but these were different from the ones she'd shed during the confrontation. These were tears of understanding, of recognition that kindness had been flowing both ways across this table for months, without either of them fully realizing it. "What happens now to those men? I mean," David's expression grew thoughtful, "they'll learn that actions have consequences. Their businesses won't collapse overnight, but they'll have to work much harder to rebuild the trust they lost tonight. More importantly, they'll remember this moment every time they're tempted to treat someone the way they treated you." As if summoned by their conversation, Danny Murphy approached with a manila envelope. "Elena, this came for you about an hour ago. Courier said it was urgent." Elena opened the envelope with trembling fingers, then gasped. Inside was a check made out to Sofia Rodriguez, her granddaughter, in an amount that would cover all her medical treatments and more. The memo line simply read, "For a brave little girl from a friend." David was already standing to leave, gathering his jacket with the same quiet grace he'd shown every evening for months. Elena stood too, clutching the life-changing check, understanding now why her granddaughter's hospital bills had been weighing less heavily on her heart lately. Why certain treatments had mysteriously become covered by a charitable foundation. "The meatloaf tomorrow?" David asked as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "Always," Elena replied, her voice thick with emotion. "Same time, same table." As David walked toward the door, Elena called after him. "David." He turned back, and she saw in his eyes the same loneliness that had first drawn her to treat him like family. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me as more than just. You were never just anything, Elena. You're the reason I keep coming back to this little town. You remind me what kindness looks like." The door chimed softly as he left, and Elena sank back into the booth, holding Sophia's future in her hands. Outside, the three men who'd tried to break her spirit were learning that true power doesn't come from money or position. It comes from how we treat the people who serve us our coffee, who clean our tables, who make our world a little brighter simply by showing up with open hearts. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovering that the smallest acts of human decency can indeed change everything.